Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. Today we're continuing a series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and I got a very fun and very exciting video for you guys this afternoon, because as of this morning, Robert or FPGAZumSpass published his new work-in-progress Game Boy Advance core. I know what you're thinking, Robert already gave us a Game Boy Advance core. We've had it on MiSTer FPGA for years, including the 2-player core, and that is 100% correct, and those cores are going nowhere. But this is a new rework of his previous work, getting cycle accuracy into the system where it wasn't before, because he had some ideas on how he can improve on his previous core, and it is absolutely amazing to see. Now do be aware this is not an update all as of yet, it is work in progress, and if you want to install it, you'll have to grab it from the Game Boy channel over on the actual MiSTer Discord server. And for every game that works as good as I'm showing you here today, there's going to be games that have some glitches. This is work in progress, this is core development, so don't go in expecting 100% compatibility with every single game like in the previous core, and you will not be let down. But honestly, seeing Robert jump back into the MiSTer FPGA game after the PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64 cores is spectacular, and as much fun as the previous Game Boy Advance core is, having a cycle accurate version of it in development is going to be even better for the future, because we all love that cycle accuracy on MiSTer FPGA. Now do be aware that this is going to lose some features permanently that you would see in the previous core that isn't having that cycle accuracy badge applied to it. You're going to lose fast forward, turbo, rewind, and high-res rendering resolutions forever, according to Robert. Some features like cheats and color shading aren't quite yet in the core but are planned to come back, so it's one of those things to get the cycle accuracy that you would want out of MiSTer FPGA. Some of those bonus features on the original core are going to go by the wayside, which again is totally fine, because the original core that you can play today is absolutely going nowhere. There's just going to be a pivot on the existing core, kind of like how we have the N64 Turbo core living side by side by the base Nintendo 64 core as well. But honestly, so far in my testing, this is absolutely spectacular. Now there are some games out there reported to have some bugs, and there is a testing sheet being made right now so the community can go through and test every single game, report the bugs, so that Robert or FPGAZumSpass can go back in and kind of patch them up and figure out what's going on. So if you're not already on the MiSTer Discord and you want to help test, definitely jump over there and kind of just say what you're seeing when you test this core. And just so you know, I am using a MiSTer FPGA from MiSTer Add-ons, as well as an original Jurassic DE10 board on dual 2.9 RAM, but honestly it's only using a single stick of RAM, so that dual doesn't matter whatsoever. But if you do test, definitely report what you're using, whether it's a MiSTer Pi, an original Jurassic, something like a QM Tech clone. That information does help, including what variant of the RAM module you're on, because a few people reported some freezing in the intro to Aria of Sorrow here, and I didn't have any issues with that whatsoever. But that is what happens when you have a work in progress core. Some people will see bugs, others won't. And then when we report those bugs, they will actually get looked at, and we'll figure out exactly why those people are seeing the issues. Because if you just want to sit down and play a Game Boy Advance game from start to finish on MiSTer FPGA today, I wouldn't recommend using this core. This is for testing, it's for fun, it's to see the improvements and also find out where the bugs are, and then from there kind of go and help improve it. So it's one of those things, don't start a new gameplay session of Castlevania thinking you're going to see the credits scroll. If you do, you will be lucky, but you might hit a crash or some bug maybe 4 or 6 hours into the game that'll stop you from progressing until the core gets updated. Because obviously for a new core launch, this does a lot more than other cores you see, because it is rewritten from partial code on the original core, but it still isn't something that's finished, even though this footage here looks like it is just working perfectly. I did encounter a few bugs, and I'll talk about them later on in the video, but I just wanted to go over some of my favorite Game Boy Advance games, the games that I would sit down and just play if I felt like playing some Game Boy Advance today. But as far as Aria of Sorrow is concerned, from the look to the feel to the controls to the latency and even the music, I'd really have no idea that I was playing a work in progress core. And again, that's not something we'll be able to say for every game, but for a game as popular and famous as this one, that is awesome. So it's going to be the first soundtrack sample. Go ahead and listen for 45 seconds and hear if you notice anything that you don't think sounds accurate to your ear, but come back because I got a lot more games to test and show you. I mean, honestly, it sounds like Aria of Sorrow to me, and it's not like the Game Boy Advance ever had the best audio quality in the world either, but if you hear anything in there that you don't think is right, leave me a comment down below, because I always say I only have 2 ears and I only have 2 eyes, and you guys are numbering in the thousands on the views, so that means there's multiple thousands of ears and eyes amongst you. Kind of sounds creepy, but for Castlevania, it just works. But as far, again, as Aria of Sorrow is concerned, I had no issues whatsoever, even though some people had some freezing in the intro, so your mileage may definitely vary, and if you do see some freezing, leave me a comment and tell me on what hardware it was. But let's move over to F-Zero, another classic game on the Game Boy Advance, and one that I saw a few people have freezing with when they fell off the course. And we'll just go ahead and give Robert a little bit of a claim here on the name, even though I couldn't spell ZumSpass the first time. Gonna have to go up in there and fix that W into an M. Don't know how I screw that up, but it's one of those things that does happen. But as we jump into the gameplay, this is a really fun and effective version of F-Zero, because the Game Boy Advance could do that Mode 7 style rendering just like the Super Nintendo could, so you really do get that pseudo 3D effect. And with all of the awesome colors in the Game Boy Advance's color palette, as well as on clean HDMI out, it just looks absolutely incredible. And this is another game, as far as my limited testing is concerned, I couldn't find any single issue with it. The only bugs I was able to find were audio related, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit. But for a first pass at a core, this thing is absolutely accomplished so far. And obviously Robert has the chops. We have the Game Boy Advance core from him already. We have PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64, so it's not surprising that even for a first work in progress beta of the core, it is doing so well. And that is always fun, because we always talk about cycle accuracy and a one-to-one replication of hardware and FPGA code on MiSTer FPGA. So going back in and reworking it to pass the test on cycle accuracy is going to be awesome. But it's one of those things, just because you pass the digital tests, those kind of ROM checks so you can check to make sure the hardware is working correctly, does not mean there won't be bugs and freezes when the game's in and of themselves. Cycle accuracy and the overall core performance are two different things, so just keep that in mind, because I understand sometimes the words cycle accuracy don't really mean that much to you or anybody else. Let me try to explain it conversationally. A cycle, as far as the hardware is concerned, is a set period of time where X amount of things need to happen at the exact same timing as real hardware. If you can measure that and they hit that cycle accuracy, you'll get a pass on all of the checks. Now, if even one instruction or otherwise is off timing, you won't pass the check, but maybe you wouldn't be able to actually ever notice. A lot of the things in cycle accuracy are measurable by machine, but not the human eye or hand. So it's one of those things, even if it isn't cycle accurate, you might never notice when you're actually playing a game. It's just a set period of time and what needs to happen within that time. Think about it this way: if you had a minute and needed to accomplish 100 things, and you did those 100 things in that minute, you'd be cycle accurate. If you accomplished 99.9% of those things in that minute, and that 1/10 of 1% went over to minute 2, you were not cycle accurate, even though you're just kind of talking about a rounding error. Now, that's a little bit of an in-depth explanation, but I want you to understand. But moving back a little bit more fun, we're going to be talking about actual Metroid here. This is just one of the best games on Game Boy Advance. It's got a spectacular soundtrack and story, and it is going to be your second soundtrack sample. So go ahead and listen for 30 seconds, and again, try to hear if there's anything about the sound and audio that you don't think's right, and I'll be right back. I mean, again, it sounds good to my ear. Maybe a little bit more static in there than I remember, but again, the Game Boy Advance's sound quality was never top-notch whatsoever. It always had a little bit of that static and otherwise hum in the background. But if you know this game like the back of your hand, leave me a comment down below and you let me know. But as far as everything else is concerned, the gameplay, the graphics, all of the inputs, I really can't point to anything in Metroid here that would make me think that it wasn't doing anything other than exactly what it should. And I'm just kind of going over the top-note games here, all of my favorite Game Boy Advance games, but it is an absolutely massive library, so actually testing these games to help Robert get the core finished up is going to take a while. This isn't the type of thing that next week or the week after that you're going to have 100% of games working. Remember, some of the development times take a very long time, so this might be something you might not see it finished until 2026 or even later after that. It just takes as much time as it takes. We'll just have to wait and see. But as far as bugs within the core are concerned, I didn't really capture any whatsoever when I was testing nothing but Inferno Habanero sent me some captures that he posted on Mr. Discord, and you can definitely tell right now Toad is just floating around the screen straight up dead here in a soft lock. It's one of the most hilarious glitches I've ever seen, and I asked him to use it because I really just wanted to show you what looks like dead Toad just floating around like a ghost. Definitely a haunted version of the game. It is hilarious. If we move over to Donkey Kong Country, again you're going to see, not quite sure where this dude is going, but he is just wandering around the screen while Diddy Kong is frozen in time there. So you will encounter these kind of bugs and other ones, and I just did want to show you a couple of visual ones because the only ones I captured were audio based, and because it causes clipping in the audio channel, it just doesn't sound good. I'm not going to give you a sound sample of them because it just makes your ears hurt like it did mine when I was capturing them. But moving over to Super Mario Advance, the first game I ever played on Game Boy Advance when I bought one back in the day. This is one that I probably played through maybe 5 or 6 times, and was the first game I wanted to check when we got the new core, and just like everything else I've shown you so far, I really wasn't able to find any issues in the visuals or sound that I could point to say that it was doing anything other than what it should be doing. And that is the tricky thing. Maybe I just got really lucky and picked a selection of games I wanted to talk about and show, and I kind of just got past all of the bugs that are inherent in other games, or maybe I just got blessed with a lucky day today. That's one of the things again about work in progress cores. What you see me accomplishing on screen might not be the result you get when you test it. Depending on what board you're using, depending on what RAM you're using, those things usually kind of get unified later on in the development process. So if you don't get the exact same result you see on screen that I am getting, don't worry too much about it, and just remember again, like the Nintendo 64 core and PlayStation 1 core, your mileage may vary while it is in development. But this sound seems perfect to me, so it's your next soundtrack sample, 30 seconds, and I still have more games to show you, so come back. Seems pretty good in the audio department as far as I'm concerned. Now moving over to the one game I was able to find issues with, this is Yoshi's Island on the Super Mario Advance version, and the only issue I had is in the intro cut sequence when it kind of sets up the entire story. Some of the background sound effects were basically clipping the audio channels and were distorted, but when there's something like that, I don't really give you an example of it because nobody wants to hear that coming through their televisions or coming through their headphones. But as far as visual glitches are concerned, I wasn't able to find a single one today, and that's why Inferno Habanero helped me out with his captures. And those weren't even so much visual glitches as they were just logic issues where the game had basically frozen and done something odd, and just expect to see stuff like that and you won't be disappointed whatsoever. But it's so much fun to have another core in active development, even if it is one we already have, because getting cycle accuracy is going to be awesome. And again, this is not going to replace the core that's already there or the 2-player variant of it. Just think of it as a bonus core, like we have the PlayStation 1 bonus cores and we have the Nintendo 64 bonus cores, because Robert always loves going back in, taking a look at his work and figuring out how to make it better, and that's always outstanding. And I was being an idiot here and forgetting to jump because I accidentally bound the buttons on my first test backwards, so jump was actually tongue and tongue was actually jump. And do be aware that you might see a fast forward and rewind binding in this core when you test it, but those features are never coming back for it. Robert just hasn't removed the bindings yet, so if you see those and you're wondering why it doesn't work, that is why. And I figured I would give one quote-unquote fan game a test here. This is the Mother 3 English translation, and we're going to name the dog Gizmo after our new healer puppy that we just got exactly a month ago as of today. He's awesome. You guys keep asking about him, so just know his name is now Gizmo. And I just wanted to try something that wasn't a retail release, that was a fan game, quote unquote, because it is in English where there was never an English release of Mother 3, and everything ran perfectly fine up until the point in time that I got into the gameplay and was still good. I just had to move on so I could actually get to editing and voicing this over for you guys so I could hit the day of release news. But it's absolutely spectacular to get new developments in Game Boy Advance. Robert just going back in there and trying to make it every bit as good and accurate as real Game Boy Advance hardware. And considering if you own a Game Boy Advance, unless you screen mod it, it's a little bit of a muddy situation on those old screens. This is definitely my favorite way to play Game Boy Advance games today. And again, if you want to test this, definitely check it out. It is under the Game Boy Advance channel on the MiSTer FPGA Discords, and the core is pinned. But if you have any questions or need any help, leave me a comment down below. But we're done. We got more cycle accuracy in Game Boy Advance, and I'll see you next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.